Hey HK fans, James here with another Workbench Wednesday video. This week I'd like to talk to you about a couple of issues that thankfully are pretty rare. We don't see them very often, but when we do, they can be quite catastrophic to the weapons. And those issues are an out of battery malfunction, meaning the weapon firing out of battery, and a squib round. Now I just happen to have an example of each that came into the shop this week for repair. So this is a good opportunity to take a closer look at what causes those issues, what we can do to help minimize those, and then obviously a glance at what I do to make that corrective action for the customers. So let's flip it around. We'll take a deeper dive here on the workbench and look closely at these issues. So let's take a look at the first issue, and as we discussed, that is an out of battery malfunction. So what that means is that the weapon itself fired before the slide, in this case a pistol, or in a rifle it'd be the bolt, was fully seated, meaning you've got a cartridge, it's moving forward to move inside the chamber, but it's not fully seated, and the slide's not fully set in its closed and locked position, and the weapon fires. Okay, the problem when this happens is that because that cartridge, that bullet, is not fully seated into the chamber, that case is not fully supported. So if it was pulled back to here, half of that cartridge casing would be sticking outside of the chamber, and when that detonation goes off, instead of all of that power, all that explosion moving forward through the barrel, now it's going to go in the path of least resistance. And that path of least resistance is going to be up and out of the ejection port. What you'll also see at times is it'll blow out and down through the magazine well. It'll blow the magazine out. You'll usually see the floor plate of the magazine blown off, the followers bent and deformed, and mag springs, all the rounds fall out. A lot of times with polymer framed receivers where they're weaker than the steel ones, like these guns, you'll see blowouts of the receiver in those areas. And then on this specific pistol, we saw damage to the right side of the receiver where it's weaker than the other side. So obviously, if you're gripping the handgun on both sides, you can have damage to your hand as well. So it's definitely can be catastrophic. But it is one that we don't see very often, especially in handguns of newer designs, because those pistols all come with a safety feature to prevent that, called a disconnector. And even though this is an older design from H&K, the P9S has a disconnector as well. So I'm still kind of unclear on how this happened in the first place. I suspect that there was enough debris and gunk inside the receiver from lack of maintenance that was preventing the disconnector from operating like it should. But after I've done all of my work here, it's functional again like it should be. So we'll take the slide off and I'll show you how the disconnector works. Obviously it's different in every weapon, but this is how it works for a P9S as a safety feature. So hammer fired gun, if I cock the hammer back, what you have at this point is the hammer being held to the rear by the sear, the contact interface point between the hammer and the sear. Okay, and what we're looking at is this rounded section right here called the disconnector. Okay, and when it's at rest, it sits up. When it's against spring tension, it pivots down. And hopefully you can see here, but forward of the disconnector is a trigger bar that's connected to the trigger. And when I pivot down on the disconnector, you should see that the back of it goes down, the front of it goes up, and it pulls that trigger bar up with it. Okay, so when it's at rest, if I pull the trigger is going to pull the trigger bar forward. The trigger bar is connected to the sear. It's going to pull the sear forward and off its intercept notch with the hammer, and the hammer is going to fall forward. But if you depress the disconnector and it's pressed down and I pull the trigger, I can pull the trigger all the way back all day long because the disconnector has pulled the trigger bar out of position with the sear. So that's how it's supposed to function, and how it interfaces with the slide is if you look on the inside of the slide, there's this concave section right here that the disconnector rests inside of when the gun's in battery. But if the gun moves out of battery, meaning back to the rear, you'll see it ramps down onto this lower section here, and that's what causes the disconnector to go down and pivot and do its job. So I can only suspect that something was wrong here with the disconnector, and that's what allowed the weapon to have an out-of-battery malfunction. Okay. Unfortunately, I did not think about doing this as a video when I first got this pistol in, so I didn't take pictures of what it looked like, beforehand, and I just got right to doing the repair to get it back into standing, as you see here. But I did contact the owner, and he had taken some pictures immediately after the incident. So you can see here from those pictures, the slide was locked all the way back to the rear and would not go forward. And the reason it wouldn't go forward is because the damage from the out of battery fire had actually bent the right side of the receiver right there inside the magazine well, to the point where it had pushed the slide off of the slide rails, so the slide couldn't go forward. You can see it also cracked the wraparound grips, and it did some damage to some other internal components. But it held up much better than some other guns, as you can see here. Examples of out of battery malfunctions can do to lesser quality guns. What you'll also notice from this photo from the owner is the cartridge casing here. You can see that the bullet itself is ruptured and deformed, and that was actually the casing that was in the top of the magazine. So the one that fired, obviously the bullet went down the barrel and left the barrel. The empty casing ruptured and flew out of the ejection port. But this one actually is the damage inside the magazine well from that explosion. So again, now we got the gun all disassembled, cleaned, and inspected, put back together again, and smooth as it should be, ready to go back to the customer. So I'm really happy about that we were able to salvage that for him with pretty simple fix. Okay, and that takes us to a squib round. So what is a squib round? If you're not familiar with that, what it means is you have a cartridge that is underpowered. It is malfunction in the design or the production of that cartridge. And it is underpowered to the point that when the weapon is actually fired, that bullet will move some distance down the barrel, but will not have enough energy to actually leave the barrel. So it'll stay somewhere inside the barrel. And what you want is to be able to be cognizant enough of your shooting to be able to recognize that situation. And obviously, if it's underpowered, it's not going to have the same recoil impulse that firing a regular cartridge would, so you most likely won't feel or see the slide go all the way to the rear like it normally would. But what you really want to pay attention to is what we in the shooting community call an audible pop. So the bullet, because it's lower pressured, is not going to have the same sound as a regular bullet would when it's fired. So that audible pop should tell you, hey, something's not right with what happened. And if you're aware enough, you can stop, disassemble your weapon, check, and most likely what you'd find at that point is a bullet that's sitting inside your barrel. Unfortunately, most of the times guys don't recognize that, especially if they're shooting rapidly, and they fire that second round. And that's what causes the problem, is that second round will actually impact the back of that bullet, and it'll blow both the bullets out the barrel, but in the process, it will bulge or rupture your barrel. As you can see in these photos, dependent on the quality of the barrel and the overall design of the pistol, that damage can be, rather minor or rather severe. It can crack and rupture the barrel. It can crack and rupture the slide. Many times with polymer frame pistols, it can destroy the lesser strong rigidity of a polymer receiver over a steel receiver. You can have some serious damage with these types of issues. And that's where, again, a nod to H&K. And if you've seen my other videos where I talk about specific pistol lines and how the weapons are manufactured, if there's one thing that H&K does really, really well, and better than just about everybody else is it's in their barrel manufacturing. They use the best quality steel in their cold hammer forging process. Barrel manufacturing is just incredible. And so you rarely ever see an issue where you have anything more than what we call a bulged barrel. And this is an example of this in this P7M8. Again, unfortunately, like before, I went straight to get to work on this pistol and did not take the before pictures. But what I received was a pistol with the slide locked into full recoil that would not come forward. And the reason it wouldn't come forward is because the P7 series has a recoil spring that fits over the barrel, and when the barrel bulged, it created a ridge that the recoil spring could not move over within the confines of the inside of the slide. So it took a little bit of persuasion to get the slide off, but that's now what we're left with. And hopefully you guys can see clearly what we're talking about here in the bulge right here in the barrel. It should be pretty definable. How much larger the diameter here. You can actually see the ridge lines here of where the recoil spring was when the bulge hit, and it actually created imprint lines there. And you can see a larger line right here where the slide, the opening of the tang of the slide where the barrel protrudes out, where it impacted as well. So pretty significant. If we looked inside here, and I don't know how well you guys can see this, but inside the barrel, you have the barrel flutes in the chamber, and then you should be able to see the very clear polygonal rifling. And then about halfway down the barrel, it'll look like, you know, a dirty ring, you know, like I didn't clean the barrel well enough. And then you'll see the clear polygonal rifling after that. That dirty ring is actually the bulge in the barrel where it's actually blown out that section of the rifling. So again, very lucky for this owner that that's all the damage that happened to it. The receiver's, you know, perfectly fine. The slide, all the other components are good. It's just the barrel that itself was bulged. So what do we have to do with this? Well, I've got to replace the barrel. So how do we do that? Well, it's a little more difficult than it would be on many other guns where you just, you know, call up the company and say, hey, I need a new barrel, and they send it to you and you drop it in. This one, as you can see, I've already removed the barrel pin. So what I need to do is I need to press out this barrel, and then we need to press in a new one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press the barrel out, and then we'll take a closer look at the differences between the old bulge barrel and the new one that we're going to put back in there. Okay, so now we've got the barrel removed out of the receiver, and again, I'll give you a closer look here, side-by-side comparison with the new barrel here on the right, the old barrel on the left. And if we look down into the bores themselves, you can see that noticeable bulge in the old barrel on the left versus the smooth lines of rifling on the one on the right. Okay. The other thing I want you to notice here on the barrels, and this is what most people aren't aware of, you guys can see the little barrel port, little hole in the barrel on both of these, and that is where the gas is actually diverted down through the chamber into the gas cylinder. Okay, so your gas cylinder, this large hole right there on the bottom. If you look inside the receiver, I don't know how well we can see this, but there's a little hole right there at the bottom of the inside of the trunnion there that allows the gas to fill into the gas cylinder. And then obviously this is a piston operated weapon. So we have a gas piston on the inside of the slide, and that gas piston fits inside that gas cylinder, and that's what creates that momentary delay that makes these weapons so comfortable to shoot and really makes them more accurate. So obviously when we put in the new barrel, we've got to make sure that we align that gas port correctly with the opening there in the receiver. The other thing to notice here on these barrels is if we look on the barrel on the left, you'll notice just below where that gas port is, there's a recessed cutout, and it is not on the barrel on the right, which is the new barrel. that cutout is for the barrel pin that holds the barrel securely in place. So obviously what you have to do once you do put the barrel in is you have to then make the cutout exactly where it should be and exactly the right diameter so that the barrel pin can then fit back inside and secure the barrel in place. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our new barrel and we're going to set it on the barrel press, and then we're going to press that barrel back into the receiver. Okay, and once we're done with that, I'll take it over to the drill press and I'll show you what we're going to do there. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the new barrel pressed into the receiver, and I now need to make the cut into the bottom of the barrel so we can get that barrel pin back in. So I've got the drill press fixture for the P7 series set here, obviously in my drill press. So I'm going to go ahead and position the P7 receiver correctly in place, front and rear, and then I'll lock it down. And then you can see I've got a little guide sleeve fitted in here, and what I'll do is I'll actually use this titanium drill bit to drill down and cut that notch in the barrel. And once that's done, I'll replace that drill bit with a reamer. I'll ream that out, and then we'll remove the receiver from the press here, and I'll drift the barrel pin back in place. And here we have it, all reassembled, operating as it should. We have a salvaged P7M8 that the owner thought was possibly a complete loss. So really excited to be able to get this back to him for more enjoyment. Okay, so let's take a look at what we can do to help minimize the chances of these issues occurring. Let's start with the out of battery malfunction. Obviously that's not as much related to the ammunition themselves as it is the weapon and how well it's being maintained and if there's any kind of failures on the internal components. So that really comes down to the maintenance regime that you have on your weapons. And I fully understand that, there's a lot of people out there that cleaning their weapons, maintaining their weapons is the last thing they want to do. You're not like me. I actually get almost as much enjoyment out of cleaning the guns as I do shooting them, but I fully understand that. And so I would say that really kind of falls into two categories of deferred maintenance. One, where there's pretty much no lubrication and attention at all, and then one where there's over lubrication. The under lubrication is one I see quite often, where the guns are just bone dry, and just like a car engine needs oil to keep all those parts lubricated and running, so does your gun. And when it dries out, you'll just have carbon build up, surface rust build up in some of those areas. Now, some of the newer guns with fewer moving parts, that's not as big an issue. But with the legacy guns like the ones we've showcased here today, a lot of moving parts, a lot of tight tolerances, they're going to require them to be maintained. They're going to require a level of lubrication in there. And that leads me to the flip side of that. Those guys who take the grips off their P9S or their P7 series pistols, they see all the intricate working parts and they say, whoa, that's too much for me to take apart. And so their solution is just to douse it with solvent, thinking that that's going to be great for it. And what happens is that solvent will pool in certain areas in those tight tolerances and it'll coagulate. And then that'll also attract dirt, debris into the gun and carbon, and those coagulated areas will actually gum up the works of the pistol, so it won't function as it should. So there's a balance between all those things. And again, in the end, if you're unclear or unsure on how to do that, that's what I'm here for, guys. You can send your gun to me and I'll send it back to you, and it'll be all done up as you would expect it to be, maintained well. Now looking at the squib round, that is definitely an ammo related issue. So how do you prevent that? Well, just like I look at a P7 as a high dollar rare item, just like I would owning a Porsche. I don't put piss in my gas tank, I don't put crap ammo in my guns. So the best thing you can do is to feed it reliable quality ammunition. Even some of the well-known companies that make ammo will have a bottom barrel ammo line. Comes to mind is Winchester White Box. You see it, it's the Walmart special. You can usually find it just about anywhere, and it is their crappiest line of ammo, and we've seen it cause problems time and time again. There's many other companies that have similar types. We're in the middle of an ammo crisis right now, just like we were 4 or 5 years ago, and what we saw at that point, which I'm sure we're going to see at this point as well, in the training courses that we would teach and working on the guns here on the workbench, is an influx in ammo-related failures in those lower cost ammo lines. And that's just because those companies are just pumping out as much as they can to meet this demand. The quality control standards go down. So we saw a lot of more malfunctions out of that. So buy higher quality ammunition from a reputable manufacturer that's in the right spec for your gun. That's another important thing to remember. And you'll have less of a chance of this being a problem. Stay away from reloaded ammunition. If you're doing your own reloads and you're really super smart on how to do all this, then less of an issue. But what I'm talking about is people who are buying ammunition and they're not aware that it's reloaded. How you can tell, obviously reloaded ammunition is not going to come in the original boxes. A lot of times you're going to see that for sale, and it's in like a big Ziploc bag of 100 rounds or 250 rounds kind of taped off. That's most likely reloaded ammunition. And you have no idea who reloaded it and to what quality spec it is. Likewise, you go to a range and you're shooting and you didn't bring enough ammo, and you go and you buy their range ammo. Almost always that's going to be reloaded ammunition, even if it's in what looks like an original box. And a lot of times what you'll have there, end of the day, you got the guy who's sweeping up all the empty casings for the range, puts them in a big bucket, and he goes back and he starts reloading that ammunition. So now you've got casings from how many manufacturers, who knows, all thrown into to one set for reloads. Who knows how many times those casings themselves have been reloaded, and the structural integrity of those casings has been reduced. So bottom line, stay away from reloaded ammunition, especially if you're shooting these high dollar weapons. You'll have less of a chance for those problems. But anyway, to summarize, I hope you've enjoyed this video. You've learned a little bit more about these two issues, what they are, how to prevent them, and now you can see that if you've got those kind of issues, that with your H&K weapons, I'm a great source for you to send them to for repair and get them back to you in better condition than you send them to me in. So, as always, I appreciate you tuning in. If you're in need of HK service and support, or you're looking for unique training opportunities, give me a shout. That's what I'm here for. Thanks, guys.